Hi, I'm Maribel. My sister used to laugh about me mopping floors at a tech startup, until the day I walked on stage and revealed I was the CEO of a $42 million company. But that stage? It came after years of being invisible, of dinners where I sat at the edge, of gifts no one opened, of praise handed to everyone but me. Why does family sometimes forget the one who stays the quietest? Before we dive in, I'd love to know. Have you ever been the one left out? The one who gave everything and still wasn't enough? Tell me where you're watching from and what time you hit play. I'm reading every comment. I arrived 7 minutes late. Not enough to be considered rude, but just enough to be noticed. Just enough for Jolene to smile with her lips pressed together and say, "Oh, look who decided to grace us with her presence." Her voice floated out from the dining room like a curtain fluttering open. Carla peeked from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a floral towel. "Maribel, you're always on your own time, huh?" I didn't respond. I just placed the bottle of wine on the counter, something dry and cheap enough to signal that I wasn't trying too hard, and made my way toward the table. The house smelled like rosemary and lemon, and everything familiar and hollow. I had known that smell since I was 5, but it never felt like it belonged to me. The wallpaper had changed over the years. The rugs were newer, the chairs more cushioned, but the dynamics were carved in oak, solid, polished, unyielding. Dinner had already started. Tobias was talking about a conference he just led in New York, something about fiscal policy shifts. Jolene interrupted to mention an influencer campaign she had just launched in partnership with a sustainable makeup brand. Carla beamed at them both, nodding with that glazed sort of maternal pride that had never made its way in my direction. Jeremiah stayed quiet, cutting his steak with the same slow precision he applied to most of life. When I pulled my chair out, it was the one at the end of the table, slightly turned away from the center. No one had moved it closer. No one ever did. I adjusted it myself, letting the wood legs squeak against the tile. I had barely touched my soup when Carla, napkin dabbed to her lips, posed the question, "If something ever happened, and I wasn't around, which of you do you think would hold the family together?" Jolene leaned back and laughed. "Well, obviously me. Tobias is always working, and Maribel—" She paused for effect. "Well, unless mopping counts as a leadership skill?" Tobias smirked, and Carla smiled like it was all so lighthearted. Jeremiah didn't flinch. He rarely did. I stared at the bowl in front of me, where the broth had begun to form a thin skin. No one corrected her. No one defended me. I wasn't surprised. It wasn't the question that bruised. It wasn't even the joke. It was the rhythm of it all. The way the laugh slipped so easily from her mouth. The way the chair was always just a few inches too far back. The way I could exist in that house and still not be seen. This had been happening for years. I had stopped bringing wine because no one poured me a glass. I stopped trying to speak because nobody listened beyond the first sentence. Jolene laughed again, this time louder, retelling a story that didn't involve me. Her hands gestured in the air, her words catching the candlelight like sequins. Across the table, I watched her. It wasn't the question that hurt. It was knowing they already had the answer, before I even walked in. The house looked the same, but something about the way Carla offered me iced tea made me uneasy. She handed it to me like she was performing generosity, not offering it. "Tobias is doing so well lately," she said, smiling like she'd been rehearsing that line in front of the mirror. "He's just driven." I nodded, pretending to sip, even though the ice had already half melted and the lemon slice felt like an afterthought. Something was coming. I could feel it in the way her eyes kept shifting, in the way she didn't quite meet mine when I asked how she'd been. We sat in the living room, the couch too stiff to sink into, the silence too calculated to trust. She didn't waste time. "Remember that money we were setting aside for your car?" I looked up. My fingers tightened around the glass before she even finished the sentence. "We had to reallocate it," she continued, as if shifting budgets was as mundane as watering plants. "Tobias needed a down payment. His expansion project is time-sensitive." I let the silence hang there for a moment too long. She filled it, like always. "You're so good at managing with less," she said. "You've always been resourceful. Tobias, he's under a lot of pressure." I wanted to ask if he was also under pressure to say thank you, But I didn't. I placed the glass down carefully, aligning it with the corner of the coaster like I was arranging something fragile, something that could still crack if it shifted even slightly. Later that afternoon, I took the bus home. It was packed. Someone's bag kept hitting my thigh, and the air smelled like old air conditioning and fatigue. Through the window, I watched couples unlock cars with sleek key fobs. One woman leaned into her passenger seat and pulled out a box of cupcakes. I thought about how long it had been since anyone picked me up, since anyone even asked if I needed a ride. The notification came while the bus turned onto Tryon Street, Instagram. Jolene had posted a new reel, a white hybrid SUV, parked diagonally for maximum lighting. She twirled the key in one manicured hand and grinned at the camera. The caption, "Earned. No handouts." I stared at it for a long time. I didn't like it. I didn't share it. I didn't even screenshot it. I just closed the app and stared at my reflection in the smudged bus window. I wasn't angry. I was just being edited out. The lights in the ballroom were soft, diffused through hanging crystal strands that caught the camera flashes just right. I had chosen my dress carefully, sleek, modest, a deep navy that said I belonged here, but wasn't looking for a spotlight. I wasn't the type of donor who needed recognition. Not usually. But this night was different. I walked in alone. My name wasn't listed on the welcome screen or the donor board. I didn't expect it to be. The donation had come through the corporate foundation arm of Nexus Soft, under a general fund that I'd kept deliberately vague, anonymous technically. Still, I thought someone might know, someone might say something. They didn't. A waiter offered me champagne. I declined. I didn't want to hold anything breakable. The evening moved like clockwork. Introductions, polite laughter, a string quartet version of Ain't No Mountain High Enough. I sat 3 tables from the stage. Jolene was closer. Of course she was. She wore a sleeveless red gown and smiled like it was her wedding night. They introduced her as one of the faces of modern medicine, a trailblazer, a community favorite. When she took the stage, the crowd leaned in. Jolene had always known how to work a room. She thanked the hospital board, her department, a handful of sponsors. And then, with a hand placed delicately on her chest, she added, "But none of this would have been possible without my big brother, Tobias, who connected the dots and helped fund tonight's incredible event." My chest didn't tighten. It hollowed. I stared straight ahead, blinking, trying to track the notes of the string quartet through the buzzing in my ears. Tobias, who hadn't donated a cent. Tobias, who didn't even show up tonight. I clapped when the crowd clapped. My cheeks ached from the shape my mouth had to make. Later, while others mingled, I stood near a column and watched Jolene pose with the media backdrop. Carla kissed her on the cheek, whispered something that made Jolene laugh with her whole throat. No one asked why I was there. I was just there. A week passed. One morning, a thick envelope slid through my mail slot. It bore the hospital's embossed seal. My heart ticked differently just seeing it. Inside was a letter. To Mr. Tobias Fenn, in deepest gratitude for your role in supporting the Charlotte Community Hospital Gala. Your connections and generosity brought this night to life. The letter was addressed to me, but the name was his. A mistake, maybe not. I folded the paper precisely and walked it to the drawer in my desk. There were others in there. Notes, certificates, one ribbon from 3rd grade no one else remembered. This one joined them. Then I closed the drawer, slowly. I won't make this mistake again, I whispered to the quiet. Click, the drawer locked. The gift was wrapped in brown paper with a crimson ribbon I had pressed flat between the pages of a book for a week. The album inside wasn't fancy. No gold lettering or leather binding. Just a simple linen cover and my own handwriting on the first page. For the woman who made me. I had spent days collecting the photos, scanning black and whites from old shoeboxes in the attic, captioning them with little moments only she and I would remember. Me in her lap on the front porch swing, both of us barefoot, her teaching me to braid on a plastic doll, a Polaroid from the day we made cinnamon rolls from scratch and burned half the batch. Things no one else in the family ever noticed, let alone kept. Carla opened it between bites of her birthday cake. "Oh," she said, flipping quickly through 3 or 4 pages. This is sweet. She smiled in the direction of the table, not at me. Then she placed it beside a pile of unopened gift bags, her napkin still half folded in her hand. I watched as she turned to Jolene, who stood and walked over, carrying a wrapped box with silver foil and a giant satin bow. I figured it was time for an upgrade, Jolene beamed. Inside was a digital photo frame already loaded with color-corrected photos. Jolene on vacation in Aspen. Jolene holding a stethoscope with the caption, "Saving Lives and Skin." Jolene and Carla at a charity brunch. Carla gasped, "You always know what I love." Tobias clapped first, then Jeremiah. Everyone followed. I folded my hands in my lap. The album I gave wasn't passed around. No one asked to see it. No one said anything about the captions, the memories, the time. I could feel the ribbon still looped around my fingers from tying it that morning. I reached over, picked the album up from where it sat ignored, and retied the ribbon slowly. No one noticed. I slid it into my tote bag and placed the bag gently at my feet. This was the last time I expected them to see me. After the cake had been cleared and the coffee poured, I stepped outside. The air bit at my skin, sharp and clean. Somewhere down the street, wind chimes knocked like teeth. I stood there a long while, until the door creaked behind me and Carla's voice called out faintly, asking where the lighter was. "I gave them everything," I whispered to the night. They returned silence. The kettle clicked off. I poured the water over the tea bag and let it steep while I sank into the quiet of my living room. My phone buzzed with the usual background noise. Email newsletters I didn't read, app updates I didn't approve, promotions I never clicked. I scrolled lazily, thumb hovering more than it moved. And then I saw it. A podcast clip was trending. "Women Who Carve Their Own Path," the title said. I tapped it out of idle curiosity. The voice was unmistakable. Jolene. She was being interviewed in her usual melodic tone, the one she reserved for strangers with power. The host gushed about her skincare brand and her latest speaking event at the hospital. And then it turned. Jolene laughed softly. "You know, not everyone figures life out early. My sister, for example, super smart, really sharp in school, but she ended up, well, mopping floors in some tech startup." The host chuckled. "No way, seriously?" "She says she likes it," Jolene continued. "Minimal stress. She always had this thing about not needing recognition, which is fine, I guess. But it's also kind of sad, right? Like, wasting that much potential." They laughed together. Easy, carefree, like this was a harmless family anecdote. I sat perfectly still. The tea went cold beside me. She hadn't said my name. She didn't have to. My phone pinged again. A message. From a girl I hadn't spoken to since sophomore year. "Hey, this podcast. She's talking about you, right?" I read it 3 times before I replied. Then I erased the message, typed again, erased it. Eventually I wrote, "Yeah, that's me," and hit send. I placed the phone face down, leaned back into the couch, and stared at the ceiling. I wasn't sure if the weight I felt was embarrassment, fury, or just exhaustion. But something was shifting. This wasn't just private shame anymore. It was public branding. She wanted an audience? I opened my laptop. The screen glowed soft blue in the dim room. I clicked into the IPO press kit, checked the latest numbers, tightened a few final lines in my speech. I whispered into the quiet, "Let's give her a bigger audience." The call came just after 7. Carla's voice, warm with false sweetness, slipped through the speaker like honey too thick to swallow. "Hi, sweetheart," she began, drawing out the word like we hadn't spoken in months, which was almost true. "I was just thinking, you're probably the most financially steady one right now." There was a pause, the kind you could walk across if you were brave enough. "Tobias is trying to get this new property loan approved, and well, they said he needs a cosigner. Nothing big. Just a signature. You wouldn't have to pay anything." I didn't say a word. I let her talk. She filled the silence with reassurance I hadn't asked for. "You're always so responsible," she continued. "We knew you'd help." That sentence settled on my shoulders like a sentence, not a compliment. I told her I'd think about it. She thanked me before I even agreed. She hung up believing the answer was yes. 2 days later, the email arrived. Subject line, "Quick favor." No greeting, no explanation, just an attachment named property underscore temp underscore, hold underscore Jolene underscore tf.pdf. The body of the email read, "Can you sign and send this to Mom?" That was it. I clicked the file. The contract opened to a page full of language that might as well have been written in stone. Temporary deed transfer, financial liability in case of default, consent to lien, my name on the line. I closed the file, opened it again, read every paragraph line by line, and for the first time in this long, tangled family story, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel numb. I felt awake. I clicked reply, typed one sentence. No explanation, no signature. I hovered over send for just a breath longer than I needed, then clicked. The screen blinked. Message sent. I stared at it for a moment longer, then whispered to myself, "They're not ready for the answer this time." Then I opened a new tab, IPO Countdown Livestream Draft, and I smiled. I spotted him before he spotted me. Nate stood near the back of the room, holding a cocktail glass like it was an accessory to his confidence. His posture hadn't changed. Relaxed shoulders, cocked foot, the slight lean when he laughed. He was talking to a man in a navy suit, both wearing the same venture firm pin on their lapels. The room buzzed with IPO Eve energy. Investors mingled, reporters prepped. Emma directed a camera crew toward the branded backdrop. And then Nate turned. His eyes landed on me for a beat too long before he smiled with recognition, but not the right kind. He walked over, casual. "Hey, do you work here?" The corners of my mouth lifted. I didn't answer, just let the silence sit between us. "I mean, this place is incredible," he said, glancing around. "Very polished." Still, I didn't speak. I watched him scan my face for clues, but he wasn't really looking. He nodded once. "Well, good to see you." And with that, he turned away. For a moment, I stood frozen, not from hurt, but from the surreal nature of it all. Years ago, this man had ended things with a rehearsed speech about my lack of structure. He said I was too adrift, that he needed someone who had a clear trajectory. I didn't cry when he left. I cried the next night when I spilled tomato soup on a client invoice and couldn't afford to reprint it. That was the night I learned how to rebuild something from ashes. Hours passed. The event wound down. My team finalized the lighting grid and checked live stream syncs for tomorrow. I slipped out early. At home, I opened my laptop. New email. Subject, wow. I clicked it, already knowing. "I didn't realize. You've done really well. Guess I misread your potential back then. It's impressive, truly." No mention of the years I went unseen. No apology for the night he told me I was too quiet, too hard to figure out. Just the convenient rewriting of history to suit his discomfort. I hovered over reply, typed out a full paragraph, erased it, typed again, deleted. Then I opened my keynote draft for tomorrow and forwarded it to myself. Subject line, reminder, you're not that girl anymore. I leaned back in my chair and whispered into the hush of my apartment, the only place that had ever held all my truth. Let's see if he remembers me tomorrow. "They're seated in the VIP section," Emma whispered, her voice clipped but steady as she fastened my mic and stepped back. "Third row, aisle, all of them." I nodded once. My reflection in the backstage monitor was calm, deliberate. Blazer pressed, hair tucked behind one ear, eyes clear. I had never looked more like myself. Outside the curtain, the lights dimmed, and the MC cleared his throat into the mic. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us on this historic morning. Please welcome the founder and CEO of NexusSoft, Miss Maribel Lenz." The name hit the air like a match. Spotlights spun and settled. My heels clicked once, twice against the polished stage as I walked into full view of the crowd. And there they were. Jolene's lips parted in disbelief. Carla frozen with a hand on Jeremiah's forearm. Tobias leaning slightly forward like he'd misheard. I didn't look directly at them. I looked into the sea of journalists, investors, and cameras. I smiled. Not for them, for me. Behind the applause and camera shutters, a memory stirred. Carla on the phone weeks ago. "We won't be able to make it. You know how busy your sister is." Her tone breezy, her disinterest practiced. Jolene had responded to the invitation via text. "Sounds vague. Good luck, though." Tobias never replied at all, but now they were here, in the front row, watching. I stepped to the podium, adjusted the mic. I want to thank everyone who helped bring this vision to life, I began. The engineers, the early believers, the ones who said no, especially the ones who said no. A quiet ripple moved through the room. I spent years building quietly because I believed the work would speak louder than introductions. Today, I let the work speak. I didn't thank them. I didn't mention my family. I didn't need to. The applause rose slowly, then filled the space like a tide rising over everything that had once drowned me. I stepped down from the podium, heels steady, shoulders light. As I passed the third row, I didn't glance at them. I didn't offer a nod or acknowledgement. My silence was the only answer left to give. Emma met me near the curtain, her headset still clipped to her jacket. She leaned in, her voice soft in my ear. You made them watch. Sunlight draped itself across the hardwood floor, uninvited but welcome. I lay still in the quiet, my arms stretched out across the linen sheets. The air was soft, almost weightless, the way mornings feel when you have no one to explain yourself to. My phone blinked on the nightstand. 3 missed calls from Carla, a voice message from Jolene, an unread email from Tobias. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside, and watched the light shift across the skyline. Charlotte had never looked as honest as it did now. New, still under construction in places, imperfect, but trying. The tea kettle clicked off in the kitchen. I didn't replay the speech or the applause. I didn't need to. What echoed was quieter. The click of the drawer I had locked. The whisper I had offered to no one. The absence of panic in my chest when they stared at me from their seats and I stared straight past them. They didn't see me, but I do. When the doorbell rang, I already knew it was her. I opened it halfway. Carla stood there in a blazer too stiff for a casual visit. Her eyes held something that looked like worry, or maybe it was just surprise that I answered. We should talk, she said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't invite her in. I already did, I replied. You just weren't listening. She opened her mouth to say something, closed it, and took a small step back. I waited. Then I gently closed the door. Not slammed, not locked, just closed. The weight didn't land in my chest like it used to. It settled instead in my feet, grounding me. I sat by the window, legs tucked beneath me, and watched clouds drift across the sky like they had nowhere better to be. I thought about all the versions of me they had ignored. The one who braided her own hair at 6. The one who walked herself home from debate practice. The one who smiled when no one clapped. I didn't need to win. I just needed to stop apologizing for surviving. A knock came again, softer this time. I didn't move. Maybe next time I'll decide if I want to open it. Sometimes silence is not surrender. It's survival. And sometimes walking away quietly is louder than any scream. I used to think I had to prove myself to be worthy of love, of recognition, of a seat at the table. But now I know, worth isn't given by others. It's reclaimed by you, when you stop waiting for applause and start listening to your own voice. If you've ever felt invisible, like your story didn't matter unless someone else approved it, this is your sign. You matter even if they never say it. You matter even if they don't clap, especially then. So I ask you, have you ever been erased from your own story? And what would it look like if you wrote your next chapter, your way? If this story touched something in you, drop a 1 in the comments, or tell me where you're watching from. If it didn't connect, tell me why. I want to learn from you too. And if you'd like more stories that speak to the parts of us we don't always show, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Because your voice deserves to be heard, even if you have to whisper it at first.